I think I'm live. Hopefully. We'll see if anyone shows up to confirm or deny the state of current liveness. But running these AMAs has actually been super fun on the lives just because, like, it feels like I'm able to answer the questions more personally doing it this way when I'm actually like talking to the people rather than like just answering with a page on Instagram where like I'm limited in both scope of the answer as well as context. Holy shit, got a factory stage in here. So apparently I am in fact live. Probably wait for a couple more people to roll in before we get rolling. But how are you doing today, dude? Sick. Are live. Mian, I think, is just finishing a meeting, so maybe she'll come down for this one. We'll see if we get a special treat or something. But it's like so weird because like normally on the FCS, I'm used to having someone to like play off of. So like doing this and just having to talk to myself like feels a little bit strange, but I think we're at least managing her halfway decently. But for those of you guys in the chat, do you have anything that you want to get into today? Because if not, I'll probably get rolling on the Instagram ones. And like, I think my favorite part about like posting the Instagram AMAs live versus posting them like just to answer on Instagram is that when I post that I'm answering them live, so many people don't ask questions because like I normally get like 50 plus and like most of them are kind of annoying. But like when I say like, hey, I'm answering on YouTube, the questions are a lot less annoying and there's a lot less of them. So it feels less overwhelming. But I figure if you guys don't have anything in the chat, I will get the old phone streamer mabobber out. Oh, Matt's warming up to 305. Hell yeah, dude. Well, bring it. That's all I got to say. Bring it. Do your thing and just make sure brace is locked in, find that posterior expansion, find that pull in, and just hold her together and expect it to be hard. But even if it's hard, just don't quit pushing and she's going to go. So really excited to see that pop up in the team later on today. But as far as the Instagram questions, and again, I'm stoked that there isn't very many because last week it was like, we got a shit ton. Oh, got a question in the chat. What goes through your mind before a big lift? What is your process to lock in? Okay, that's actually a really fun question because this is something that I've had to change a ton over the years because like when I kind of got started in powerlifting, I was kind of like the typical like I'm trying to take out all of my anger to the world on the barbell, and you know that kind of helps you get fired up and that kind of does help you bring intensity. But the problem is that like if you're using anger to generate performance, how that anger kind of plays out is both a little bit unreliable in terms of creating the intent that we want under a maximal lift, as well as if that lift goes bad and you're already pissed off going into it, you're going to be really freaking pissed off after the lift, and it makes it a whole lot of not fun. And I've kind of been like had to work on making lifting more fun just so I don't burn out. And what I've kind of shifted towards doing in terms of approaching a heavy barbell is I've started more kind of just thinking about like, hey, this is a PR weight on the bar. This is a big weight on the bar. I am freaking excited that I have the opportunity to do this. And it's kind of like framing it that way. It's like I can create the same level of intensity as I can by being pissed off through excitement. And like when I'm going to the bar more positive and more excited to lift it versus just thinking about all the things that I hate, it is so much more reliable in terms of not distracting me from my job lifting the heavy barbell. And plus it makes it way more fun and almost like takes pressure off because if I'm able to frame it as like I'm freaking excited to do this, it becomes so much easier for me to bring. And then another thing that I've kind of played with too a little bit is when there's something really big and really scary on the bar for me, like my third attempt squat at King of the Platform when I loaded the same weight that blew my additors off like 2 years ago. I was thinking about like all of the people in that room and all the people back home that like believed in me that I could come back from that adductor tear. And I was like, I want to prove these people right. And like thinking, like seeing Trevor Jaffe, seeing Daniel Tiniero in the room and like standing beside me while I was getting ready for that third attempt squat, like I almost like teared up because I was so positively emotional about like how much help I got into getting back from that adductor tear. And I just wanted to like show those guys that it was worth giving me that help. And like that brought some of the like the biggest feelings I've ever had into making a barbell move. And like my third attempt squat moved better than my second attempt that was like 40 pounds lighter. So I'd say it worked pretty well, and it was definitely a good strategy. I'm going to probably start pulling that out of the back pocket a little bit more often when bigger and heavier things get into the barbell. But it kind of just comes down to like being pissed off approaching a bar isn't fun. If you can come into it with like positivity and gratitude that you get to do it, it's so much more reliable and it makes it so much more fun to get to smash big weights. And I think, again, like I'm nowhere near done in my career, but I want to minimize the amount of burnout that I get, like minimize the amount of frustration as much as I can, because I want training to be kind of like my fun time where I get to do the thing that I like. And if I can find ways to like it more, like it just makes it easier to put in the effort necessary to get where I want to get. So that's kind of my whole process in terms of approaching a heavy bar. And if you are kind of someone that is more on the nervous side approaching a heavy lift, basically confidence comes from proof. So what you need to do with your training is prove to yourself that you don't need to be worried about that weight. And like you need to prove to yourself that you are capable. And the way that you're going to prove to yourself that you are capable is basically just by doing it and building up over time and showing yourself over and over again that you can do the thing. Because if you can do the thing, you're going to be able to do the thing better. Now, as far as handling mindset when I get started in a workout and I just feel like today is going to suck, like where hips are really tight or you just feel weak, this is a very topical question because my training has felt very freaking sad because with the diet, I am so low energy and I've kind of like been almost trying to force it too hard the last couple of weeks with like holding on to strength in the barbell lifts. And it's something that I've talked about before and something that I need to do a better job of moving forward. And I'm going to pull some pretty big levers on this in the training context. But when I do feel like I'm going to die, my whole goal is to just erase any expectations from my mind and then make the only thing to just start warming up, start moving, and as I warm up and as I start moving, do the absolute best job that I can with what I have. And if what I have ends up, not being very good, if I know that I did the absolute best that I can regardless of numbers, I still know that session is going to be productive and I still know that it's going to do something good for me. Whereas if I feel like shit and I'm expecting to be able to PR on a day where I feel like shit, like again, it kind of comes back to the I'm going to make myself miserable and I'm only going to dig myself into the fatigue hole further. So again, I just focus on doing the best that I can with what I've got, hitting my prescribed effort ranges and not worrying about the weight on the bar. And if I do that, well, it's going to let me build momentum. It's going to let me not be miserable. And not being miserable and building momentum is what makes training way, way, way more productive. Now, in terms of like, if hips feel really tight on my warm-ups, I'm just going to spend more attention on making sure my hips feel better. I'm going to probably dedicate a little bit more warm-up time to touching the ranges of motion that do feel sticky. And I'm also going to remember that, hey, my hips feel sticky. I should probably be doing more stuff to prepare them so I don't need to waste time in warm-ups opening things up. And the whole thing is like, if I do feel like something is sticky in the warm-ups or something sticky during training, that is a sign for me that I need to do a better job with my movement prep or a better job managing loading in training. And if training's been cooked and something's tight, it's like, hey, maybe we need to pull back a little bit. If training hasn't been super cooked and something's tight, it's a reminder that, hey, I need to do a better job with my movement prep so stuff doesn't feel jacked up when it comes time to get to the gym. Because kind of the whole problem a lot of lifters have with warm-ups is they're trying to do all of their flexibility work in their warm-up when they get to the gym, and then their warm-up ends up taking like 45 freaking minutes to get through, which we don't want to be doing because we want our warm-up just to be basically doing what we need to do to be prepared to get under the bar, make that as minimal as possible so you just get under the bar and get rolling. So if you are spending, 45 minutes of like stretching, foam rolling, whatever bullshit to be able to get under the bar, it's like, just find time outside of the gym on your days away from the gym to do all that shit. So when you get into the gym, you can just go right into warming up and it should work way, way, way better for you. Now, Factory Sage has a pretty basic question. Deadlifts that are fine for me. However, any eccentric hinging RDLs feels very inconsistent and difficult to keep tension in hamstrings. Tried more practice, but still inconsistent. And I think a couple things that might be happening that kind of makes a hinge less hingy is that if we aren't finding hams on a hinge, it usually means that as we're hinging, instead of doing a true hinge, we're letting the knees drift forward as we're pushing the hips back. And kind of like, whether if it's a good morning, I'll kind of just say like, no, you're not doing a good morning, you're doing a shitty high squat because your knees are going forward. So I think the cue that I would try to mentally think about is, number one, drop the weight down so it's easier to figure this out. Number two, as you're doing the hinging, think about trying to flex your quads to almost like leg extend your knees backwards. So we're getting that backwards knee travel, and that should help you find way, way, way freaking more hamstring tension, which should help you do a way, way, way better job of making that hinge more effective for both touching the hams and the hips. Because if the knees are going forward, that's going to be making the leverage easier on the hips, and it's going to basically take away the hamstrings' ability to do their job. So we want to think about pushing the knees backwards with quad tension to push us deeper into that hinge, and you'll probably be able to get away with much less weight on the bar, because it's going to be like infinitely harder if you are not cheating away from the leverage. And I'm going to take a sip of root beer because I am very parched right now. Not saying the squats are going good, so I'm stoked. So keep on the good, and keep being excited that you get to smash your first 300-pound squat today. So get that rolling, and I am very, very, very excited again to see her. Now, what I will say too is Matt is someone that is in the team, and he is one of, I don't want to say like I have favorites, but like I really like how Matt treats the team, because he posts so much stuff, which means that I am seeing so much of his lifting, which makes it so easy for me to help him with his programming and help him with his technique, because I know what I'm looking for. And like that's the whole goal of the team, and like with how it is set up in the school platform, like it makes it so easy for me to be able to like have hundreds of lifters posting their videos every day. And because of how it's set up, I can keep track of what everyone's doing, and I know what I'm looking for, and I know what to be expecting, and I know what they're doing training wise. And just, it makes it so freaking cool for me to be able to help that many people. And I don't know if you guys noticed, but we have the price going up at 350 members right now. We're at 335, and kind of what I want to do is I want to try to build our way to 500, but on the way I kind of realized too how valuable the team is, so we will be continuing to jack price up a little bit as we go. We're currently at $69 a month, so if you want to lock in at that rate, which is way too freaking cheap for the level of one-on-one attention you're getting, like definitely sign up here very shortly, because once we get to 350, I'm going to be jacking her up again, and once we get to 375, we'll be jacking her up again, and once we get to 400, we'll be jacking her up again, and once we get to 500, I'm going to be basically just like limiting the people available to join, because once we get to 500, I'll just make the join price stupid so people don't sign up. But that's kind of the plan moving forward. So if you do need any help or want more in-depth with context answers based on what your lifts look like, as well as being able to customize programming to you so you can do what you need, hit that link, join the team, because it is freaking insane for the amount of value. And I think I actually realized I didn't put the link in the YouTube, but we got Andrew. I don't know how to pronounce your last name, so I apologize. I'm not even going to try that. Miana, my name pronouncer, is not here right now, so we'll have to wait for her. Maybe she'll chime in with the phonetics of that pronunciation. Maybe you could help me out, Andrew. But you'll be 45, doing your first Masters comp in October. Your goal is to have fun and go 9 for 9. How was your first competition, and what was your experience like? And what I will say with that is, I did not go 9 for 9. I still had fun. I did not go 9 for 9. And I think kind of the problem was Chanthophone. Okay, maybe. Tell me if I'm butchering that. I apologize if I am. So basically with my first meet, like my whole kind of mindset was, I want to lift as much as I freaking can. And that whole mindset kind of meant that I missed a lot of attempts on that day, which made it a little bit less fun than I expected. But what really blew me away, and what kind of saved the day, and what made me fall in love with the sport, was how supportive everyone was there. Because like as a young kid that had no freaking clue what was going on, there were pretty much every lifter that was at that meet went so far out of their way to make sure I knew what to do with my warm-ups, and made sure I had, a better idea than what I was planning in terms of attempt selection. Because basically there was, one of the older guys, Chris, like he made me basically tone down all of my openers based on my warm-ups. And like, if he didn't do that, I probably would have bombed on squat, and probably would have bombed on bench, and probably would have bombed on deadlifts too, considering that my third attempts did not go super well. But it's just like, it's such a hard thing to explain if you've never done it, because at local meets, it's kind of like people expect everyone to be all egotistical and only worried about their own stuff. But most lifters like have if they've done a meet, like they understand how difficult the day is and how intimidating the day is, and they just want to do their best to be able to help the new guys, so the new guys kind of have the same good experience they had, and it keeps carrying on, carrying on, carrying on. So like competing is so much fun and so rewarding. And like that does get a little bit trickier at bigger meets where like people are more focused on themselves out of necessity to kind of be able to throw down bigger numbers. But then it's like my goal at bigger meets is still just to have the most freaking fun I can have. And I think the last thing to touch on with that is you'll hear a lot of people saying like, if you go 9 for 9, it means you didn't try hard enough. And I think my response to the people that say that is the people that say that usually have pretty shitty totals and they don't have a ton of fun at meets. So I would rather be a guy that builds a total with made attempts than the guy that doesn't build a total because he, sent it too hard on the thirds like he did at his first meet. And like the whole 9 for 9 thing too, we got to understand that it's really freaking hard to go 9 for 9. And a lot of times, like through the middle of my career, it took me 27 meets to go 9 for 9 for the first time. But I had a lot of what I'd call perfect days before that, because a lot of times through the mid-range of my career, like what I would do is I would either game my second attempt to skip my second attempt to have a bigger rest when I was fatter and out of shape. So I'd only like say take 2 squats or 2 deadlifts. And then other times in my career, I've gone the other way. And if I've had a second attempt that was too hard to make it worth taking a third that would actually pad my total, I would just pass on my second. So even though it took me 27 meets to go 9 for 9, I had, a lot of days that were, 7 for 7 days or 8 for 8 days because I just skip an attempt strategically. But bottom line is like the guys that say that if you aren't missing attempts, it means you didn't try hard enough. No, like the goal of powerlifting is to build the biggest total possible, and the biggest total possible comes from not blowing energy, missing attempts, and leaving pounds on the platform. So I approve of the 9 for 9 day, but also understand that it will be difficult to accomplish. But if you learn to accomplish it early, like it's going to be so much easier for you because you won't have all of the stupid expectations and habits that I had to break for like through the first like third of my powerlifting. Oh shit, Matt got 305 and it felt pretty good. So yes, if it felt good, it didn't go to shit. Load up 315 and we'll see if she can move. And like, if that goes good, considering like 305 is already a pretty big PR, we probably don't need to be pushing too much further than that, especially with your meet coming up. But freaking stoked, Matt. Very, very excited to see her. Now, Danielle is here and also in the AMA, so I'll probably hit your AMA question right. Yeah, and like 9 for 9 is hard to do. So like it's one of those things where it's like, especially you being multiply, a multiply 9 for 9 is freaking damn near impossible. So like I wouldn't be too worried on that, just because like the gear makes it so much harder to predict where like limit is and loading is, and there's so much more like precision involved in both technique as well as just picking the right weights to get there. So I definitely wouldn't be too worried. But as far as the AMA stuff that you asked, so you're having some brachial plexus type stuff after Olympic lifting. So give me a little bit of context on what you're feeling, because I'm assuming that basically you're having like nervy shit going down the arm or kind of like pain right kind of through that region, eh? Now, I think like the solution either way, because again, like if we're thinking about Olympic lifting, I'm assuming you're trying to do some snatching. And if we're thinking about where the arm is going on snatching, where we need to do is we need to be able to let the shoulder blade roll behind us, right? So we can get that shoulder kind of where it needs to be to catch the bar, which I'm doing a really bad job of because I'm trying to demo with my reattached pec that's still a little bit short in this position. But what is going to be limiting that ability to get that shoulder blade where it needs to go is going to be a little bit of serratus strength to kind of get that shoulder blade to roll around, as well as pec minor length to let us have that range of motion happen. And I think like one of my favorite things for this, for everyone, even as a powerlifter struggling to get under the squat bar, is doing a PVC pipe or broomstick dislocation where we're on an incline bench with the middle of the incline bench kind of like below our back, kind of like under the center of a rib cage. And that way we can do a dislocation where we are trying to arch over top of the bench while trying to push the shoulder blade and roll it around the bottom with the serratus. And then we can use that broomstick to kind of help us get some length through that pec minor. And that can help desensitize things. And like when things are really sensitive, we don't want to force into the stretch. We don't want to make it super nasty. But what we want to do is eventually narrow the hands in a bit, eventually add some weight onto that PVC pipe. And we should be able to build both strength and tolerance in that position so that it does start working better and better for you. Now, as far as more Instagram AMA questions, how to find purpose in life. And this is something that is kind of funny because I kind of figured this out by going therapy, but in the exact opposite way of how the therapist intended, because he basically pissed me off so much that I just fixed my shit. I don't know, maybe there's some sort of reverse psychology intent, but like I was kind of struggling hard after my pec tear with like, why the hell am I doing this? Like, why the hell am I doing this thing that causes me so much frustration and like set me back so far? And it just like felt like a giant waste of effort right after that pec ripped off. And like I started kind of going to see a therapist just because one of my training partners was going to a therapist and was like, hey, this helps so much. So I'm like, okay, let's do this. And basically kind of the therapist wanted me to what he wanted me to do was basically like be more okay with not pushing and be more okay with being normal and just be more okay with not accomplishing what I want to accomplish. He was trying to like tone down my goals and tone down my mindset and tone down my ambition. And that almost mentally broke me because like I was so miserable trying to accept that like, hey, maybe my powerlifting career is over. Maybe I can't do this. Maybe trying to help people do powerlifting better is a waste of time. And kind of like it pushed me like so much further into like a well of depression that I'd ever been in. And kind of like what eventually snapped me out of it is I just kind of woke up one day and was like, fuck that. And sorry for the profanity and monetization cancellation, but it was like, fuck that guy. I am not the person that he wants me to try to be. I am someone that has ambition and I feel my best when I am helping people and being productive. And him trying to get me to accept being normal was kind of toning down my level of trying to be productive and trying to do things and trying to accomplish things. So for me at least, like finding my purpose in life was just a matter of like realizing like, hey, what do I really like to work on that lets me feel like I am doing something valuable? And that is coaching powerlifters and helping powerlifters get better and helping powerlifters figure their stuff out and kind of just like digging further into that. And like he was trying to tell me that, oh, like if I'm working 10 hours a day, it's a problem. Well, I'm way happier working 14 hours a day, 7 days a week than I was working 10 hours a day and wondering if it was too much. And he was trying to convince me that it was too much. So it's kind of like one of those things where it's like, I am so fortunate to have been able to find the thing that I can just dig right into and do all day long. And I just want to keep digging into it and keep doing it all day long. And like, I know that it is abnormal to do so, but it's like, if you want to have abnormal results, you're going to have to do abnormal things. And like, if you don't have something like that, it's just like explore things that you like and kind of figure out what you can find flow state on, what you can find that you are able to feel productive with, and just dig into that more and more and more and more. And like, the thing is that, you know, when I was kind of like having that, like, I don't know if this is worth doing because, you know, I just came off the biggest injury of my career and I was like, is it worth helping people if all this does is hurt me? And kind of what my thought process flipped to when I had that fuck that moment was like, I'm here right now. Other people end up here. My job is to show people how well I can recover from this. And I made that my mission in the moment with the PEC. And that kind of helped with flipping things around. And it just, that mindset flip kind of changed everything for me from kind of feeling the worst mental health wise I ever had in my life to feeling better than I ever have, just because it's let me dig into the thing that gives me that, I don't want to say satisfaction, but it kind of gives me that meaning of like, hey, I am doing something meaningful. I'm seeing that my experience and my pain and my suffering has been worthwhile because I'm able to help other people with that. And it's just been so freaking cool for me. And like the next level of that has been starting the team because again, like the way the team's set up, it's letting me help so many freaking lifters at such a high level every single day that it's like absolutely mind boggling for me to see the amount of progress people are making. And like seeing the amount of progress people are making there just makes me want to dig in harder and harder and harder and do a better job and do a better job and do a better job. And like it's mind blowing for me as well, knowing like when I started it and like we were sitting at like 50 members, I was having a harder time managing it at 50 members than I am at the 335 right now. And a lot of that is like, number one, just like learning to be more efficient with it and learning how to communicate better so I'm not having to, I'm able to give better quality feedback so that I can, you know, say the thing that's going to make sense for the lifter in less paragraphs. But also it is kind of just realizing that like, hey, the more people in here, the more freaking fun it is. And the more people I'm able to help, the more fun it is. So again, it's just like finding purpose for me was just kind of like recognizing like being productive is at helping lifters and what makes me happy, and then just digging right into that. Now, as far as overload, like reverse bands in a peaking block, so basically, I never want to think of chains or bands through a peak, like a circuit max style peak, as overload. What I want to think of chains or reverse bands in a peaking block as is ways where we can touch near competition loading without accumulating the amount of fatigue that it would take to actually put your third attempt on your back or in your hands in the context of bench. And kind of how I frame that is, if I am peaking a lifter that is good and able to manage things well, I will want to kind of push them so going into their final peaking block, they are pretty fatigued. And that's not a bad thing because that is going to help us generate a bigger supercompensation effect. But if they're pretty fatigued, trying to put, bigger weights in their back can be more detrimental to their ability to recover. So what we want to do with that lifter is use a chain loading, use a reverse band so that they can kind of get that practice on racking something heavier and holding something heavier in their hands or holding something heavier in their back without actually needing to move it. And if they can do that, then they're going to get the confidence of knowing how it felt in their back. They're not going to be totally smashed because we did it with accommodating resistance rather than straight weight. And then the super compensation that we get is freaking huge. Now, as far as times when gaining mobility is a bad thing, he recently unlocked a little bit more hip internal rotation, and the squat session felt way harder even on warm-ups. So I think like flexibility, like there's, holy shit, Matt got 315. Hell yeah. Stoked, dude. And again, like Matt is someone that, again, I talked about how I like what he does in the team because he is posting all the time. But the fact that he's posting all the time, like the amount of progress that he's seen from looking like a baby giraffe that has no idea where he's going when he first got in there to like now smashing. How big of a PR is that? And I'm assuming it's a pretty big PR. But as far as like seeing that progress again, like that, it's what makes me freaking happy to see. And the more I'm able to do it, like the more I'm stoked and the more I just want to keep digging in. But as far as mobility being a bad thing, like there's that old adage that like, oh, a tight muscle is a strong muscle. Well, a muscle gets tight because it is too weak to control the range of motion, and then the nervous system locks it down so you can't get there. Now, if we do get more range of motion access, what we need to do is make sure that we are training that range of motion so that we can control it. 40-pound PR. Yeah, freaking sick. Very stoked, Matt. Good work. Excited to see it. But in terms of like using that range of motion, getting it to transfer into a squat, we basically need to find ways to train that range of motion so we gain control of it so we actually can use it. And in the context of hip internal rotation, like doing some isometric contractions in the end of a 90-90 can kind of give us that basic level of controlling it. Doing some really deliberate single leg RDLs, really deliberate Cossack squats, really deliberate split squats can be good ways of controlling it. So if like range of motion improves drastically, basically what I want to do is just hammer on control, starting with isometrics, progressing into movement, so that when we do get to the barbell, we are able to control it rather than just feeling all shitty, loosey-goosey. Now, what intent to bring on secondary bench if it is not focused on dynamic effort work? And what I'll usually tell lifters is that if they are not going to do speed work on their bench day and they're doing like a higher rep protocol, what I usually want them to do is, instead of, again, like dynamic effort, what we're trying to do is move the bar fast because our intent is perfect. If we are not doing true dynamic effort work, I don't want to carry high rep set to the point where it does get sloppy because we're just trying to blast in the bar so hard that it just gets sloppy if we're doing a set of like 10, 12, 15, whatever reps. So what I'll tell that lifter to do is just really emphasize controlling the eccentric, controlling the pause, and then putting into the reversal with, some amount of intent, but not so much that it gets sloppy, and then just trying to maintain that quality through the set. Now, Kyle asked, I put this on my story already, but we have a shit ton of other program options inside of the Team Activated Program app. We have the weekly updated stuff with the team programming that I'm updating for lifters. I have 3 versions of the team programming right now, where I have a kind of pure conjugated version as well as a less conjugated version with more barbell lift focus if someone doesn't want to be doing variations. And I also am getting a 3-day-a-week variation published for guys in there that can only train 3 days a week. So we have a bunch of program options as well as pre-done full templates, plus some standalone peaks, plus a whole lot of homework. So if you are looking for solid programming with a conjugate concurrent base, the team is so freaking sick. And again, the goal of the team is to look at what people are doing on their lifts so that we can tell them like, hey, in the program templates, let's swap this exercise for this. Let's swap this rep range for this. Let's swap this RPE zone for this so they can fit the program to their needs. And again, like that's how we're generating the insane progress that Matt is seeing with his squat getting way freaking better. And he's also asking, should he use the deadlift bar for speed work or just use the power bar? I would definitely use the deadlift bar just so we can kind of get a little bit better at finding that kind of wedge intent timing, especially since we are using the power bar for mains. So definitely use deadlift bar for speed work. But team programming is so sick. And I'm just so stoked on it. And that's the whole reason I'm pumping is because like it is so cool for me to get to watch the progress that is being made. Now, as far as running a mini cut on powerlifting, I am a fan of short cuts after a meet prep because my kind of whole goal with setting up a diet into a meet prep is to be able to ramp up calories so that we have more energy to recover as weights get higher and higher through the prep. And how we can kind of do that without getting too fat is after a meet, if we do run 4 to 6 weeks of allowing ourselves to get a little bit lighter, that's going to let us ramp up through some of our off season, through the prep, so that we can kind of come back a little bit leaner and have energy to sustain the peak. And I think that the reason that I'm not doing a mini cut, I'm doing what I'd call a mega cut, considering I'm 95 pounds lighter than I was 11 months ago. The reason I'm doing that is I was just too fat to ever make a mini cut work, because if I just, lost 10 pounds, gained 10 pounds, lost 10 pounds, gained 10 pounds, lost 10 pounds, gained 10 pounds. I might get to the desired body composition eventually, but it would take me so freaking long that the reason I'm kind of going for the big full sand, feeling like I'm going to die toward a cut, is basically because if I was just mini cutting, it would take me 17 years to get the body composition I need to be to do what I'm going to do. Whereas if I go for the big cut and then rebuild slowly, I will have a much easier time with that rebuilding. And then along the way through the rebuilding, it's not like I'm going to just be able to instantly go back to being a jacked 250. I will need to probably do a little bit of bulking, a little bit of pulling back, a little bit of bulking, a little bit of pulling back to ensure that I actually am putting on good weight as I go through the rebound phase of that diet. Now, as far as what it means when pain is consistently inconsistent or on and off in one area, and that usually indicates that we're probably dealing with less of active damage, less of a true injury, and more to do with kind of developing some sort of sensitivity, whether that be kind of more of a perceived sensitivity or whether it be more of a learned sensitivity due to just touching the pain over and over again and learning to expect the pain. So what I'd kind of be trying to do is on the days where things do hurt is, number one, don't let it freak you out. But we also want to manage loading so that we're not making it worse, because if we let it freak out, it's going to make it easier to perceive threat the next time we train and easier to make it feel crappy. If we push too far into the pain, again, it's going to make it easier to perceive throughout the next session. It's going to make it feel crappy. So a little bit of it is just going to be to learn to think differently about the pain and not let it freak you out. A little bit of it is going to be to learn to manage loading around it so we're not making it actively feel worse by putting more weight onto the barbell. And what is your preferred break from one meet to another? For example, is doing a meet in late October and then doing one in mid-December too early, or should you take more time between competitions? And Andrew, I think what I'll ask too is what is your approximate gym total right now? How strong are you, knowing that you're going into your first meet? Because what I'll do with a lot of my guys that are early on is I will want them to compete very often, because competing in a meet, it's a giant amount of skill to be able to compete well. And the reason that is a meet is a lot different than training in the gym, because we have judges, we have to have timing in order, we have to have more pressure in terms of attempt selection, there's going to be stricter standards, and all of that can be very hard to wrap your head around. So if you're early on, we're going to be able to make progress no matter what. And a lot of times if a lifter's early on, we can make progress simply by just cleaning up attempt selection, cleaning up intent on meets, cleaning up your expectations, and you can put pounds on total without even getting stronger. So I usually want to see, and yeah, you're at 1325 right now, so I'm not really, even though you are 45, I'm not too worried about needing a giant building phase in order to put pounds on the total. So I think that that short turnaround would be totally fine, as long as we're kind of going into the mindset of okay, the first meet's a learning experience. Second meet, we just try to take what we learned and put on the total, put pounds on the total just by getting better at competing, getting better at peaking. And I think that should be totally manageable to pull off. And When I think a longer off season becomes more valuable is when a lifter gets further and further into their career, is it gets kind of harder to come by pounds. It gets harder to put on tissue. It gets harder to get that neurological adaptation. And that's where having more space between meets can become valuable. But something I've kind of experienced as well is when I've kind of spaced meets out more is that I've almost kind of forgot the skill of competing a little bit and kind of forgot a little bit of how the platform should feel in the flow. So I still think that how I like to kind of stack my meets now is I like to kind of have meets closer together and then allow a longer building phase, and have some meets closer together, then allow a longer building phase. So I'm kind of not only peaking once for a meet, but I'm kind of peaking for the second or third meet in a row, with that first meet is kind of a bit of a ramp up, and kind of I'm learning from that first meet to then better dial in the peak for the second. So I think that watching kind of my own career, it's I definitely see the need for longer time gaps between meets later on, but I also want to make sure that I'm competing frequently enough that I don't lose the skill. And I think something that was a very neat experiment of mine is, after I blew my knee, I came back and did one raw meet, then one multiply meet, and then I switched back to raw. And that switch back to raw after that multiply meet, I was I have no freaking clue what I'm doing. And in order to get that to work better, I competed, I think it was 6 times in a 12-month period. And I think that was some of the most valuable training and competing that I did, because it forced me to learn how to not overcook myself through a peak so that I could just jump back into another one. And it forced me to learn how to compete better and learn how to kind of just stack meet preps back to back to back to back. And I think that was one of the most valuable learning experiences I've ever had as both a lifter and a coach. And last question that we are going to finish off with is, do I follow and watch strongman at all? Got a favorite strongman? Also, what's your opinion on some of the different deadlift techniques used? So what I'll say is, I don't have freaking time to watch anything. I watch zero. With the amount of work I'm doing, I have no spare second to really absorb any content. And if I am absorbing content, it's trying to figure out how I can make what I'm doing in terms of a speaker and an educator better. So I really don't pay attention to what is going on in strength sport much at all. But I'd say my favorite strongman, probably because he's the only higher level strongman that I know, is Ilya Kazov, because he is both a freaking giant human and he's a giant teddy bear, and I love the shit out of him. So follow Ilya if you do not, because he is freaking amazing. So yeah, that's all I got. And as far as the deadlift techniques used in strongman, it's I think if a normal sized human is watching a strongman pull, I think there's a lot of lifters that I've seen that are brand new that will watch Thor pull, watch Eddie pull, watch Brian Shaw pull, watch even Mitchell Hooper pull, where they have that kind of longer or that wider stance because they are so big, they need to make more room for them to get to the bar. And then because they're, a normal height, they try to emulate that really spread out strongman conventional deadlift, and it just ends up putting them in a position where, because they're normal size, the position just sucks, and they end up having to snatch grip the thing, and their stance is way too wide. So what I'd say is, if you're watching strongman deadlift technique, what I'd remember is that unless you are 6'6" and 400 pounds, you probably should just pull a normal powerlifter and not try to emulate a strongman who is too giant to get into a decent position. Now, I think I'll probably close off here with Mike's questions. What are some things that you did to feel more comfortable in the bench after injury? I had my right pec repaired in August after it ruptured, and the bottom end feels uncomfortable. And I'm assuming you're here later, but I'll repeat what I kind of said in the beginning, is that confidence comes from proof. So my goal with any rehab process, whether it be for something post-surgical or whether it be for just, even a tendinopathy, is we got to prove ourselves that body part is ready to do the job. So a lot of my pec rehab work, once I kind of got to past the initial stages where I felt safe loading it, I dug into Buffalo Bar, I dug into the Lita Fiesta American Cambered Bar, I dug into the giant-ass cambered bench bar, just to make myself more confident in tolerating that stretch position while building strength there. And as I got better with that giant cambered bar, it felt like I was gonna die at first. But as I got more comfortable there, and as I built more trust there, and as I built more strength there, bottom ends started feeling less and less and less scary. And kind of the wildest thing is, so my pec history, so in I guess it would have been 2015, Canadian healthcare sucks, by the way, if anyone's listening, because I ripped the sternal head off of the left side originally in 2015. So all I had was a clavicular pec on this side. And then because I was compensating for that, I ripped the sternal head off on the right side. And because of Canadian healthcare, it took me like a year to get in for the MRIs for both of those. So I just never got them fixed. So my right side still doesn't have a sternal pec on it. So it's just clavicular head. My left side, the little bit of clavicular head that was left on, ripped all the way off. So I had to get both of them sewn back on when I had that surgery. But what's cool is like the repaired side, like now that I've learned to trust it, it almost feels better than the side that never got fixed. And like the side that never got fixed is still working pretty decently. So it's just a matter of just like building up trust, building up confidence, and then managing loading as you're going so you're not exceeding what the thing is going to be capable of. But on that note, I got a bunch of stuff to finish up before we have to head into training. So thank you guys so much for hopping in. And if you are in here but are not in the team, I highly advise you to do so, because like for just like giving up eating out a couple times a month or giving up a couple Starbucks coffees, like the amount of progress you get and the amount of help from me you get is so freaking insane that, again, like if everyone on earth that was a lifter knew how much they could get out of it, everyone would be in it. So on that note, if you aren't in it, sign up. If you are, appreciate you guys so much, because it does make it so much fun for me to do what I'm doing, getting to see all the help that I am getting to give and getting